and welcome to the PERC Coffee Cast, episode 5. I'm your host, Andrew, joined by owners of PERC, Alan and Philip, along with a special guest today, the Quality Assurance Manager for PERC and accomplished barista. At least we'll find out what that means. And that, Addison, welcome to the PERC Coffee Cast.
Thanks for having me.
So we get down and dirty pretty quick. Philip, what are we drinking today?
Yeah, we're drinking a wash process Ethiopia called Dimtu Tero. It's one of our core coffees, and it's fantastic. It's a really amazing coffee. We have a handful of core coffees, washed Ethiopia always being one of them, and we sample a lot of different coffees from Ethiopia to find out which one is our favorite of the season. Obviously, we try to revisit ones we've had before to try to really kind of see which ones we want to try to present. And this one, when we cup, I've mentioned always we cup blind, so we don't know what we're tasting. And this one was just one of those ones where everybody looks up and is like, that's the one. So it's so good.
So is this a recurring coffee then? Semi-recurring?
I hope so. I think this is actually first time for us for Dimtu Tero, but it's one I'm hoping will be back. We're actually cupping Washed Ethiopia's now, so we're cupping this season's Dimtu Tero as well, or this upcoming seasons. Cool. So they send us coffees that have not come to the country, so the pre-ship samples. I'm getting into a lot, but that's what we're tasting, pre-ship samples right now. And I'm hoping we're looking at a few different coffees. I think we're revisiting the Reiko first, and then after that, that's another wonderful wash Ethiopia we've had before, and we'll see what comes after that one. We'll have two different washed Ethiopias in the core coffees this season.
Awesome. All right, Alan. So we know what we're drinking. We know that it's probably coming back again next year. Why though, Alan? Why this coffee?
Yeah.
Why this week?
I mean, we haven't really mentioned this, but I'm a huge fan of natural coffees over washed coffees in general for a lot of reasons. But I mean, the fact that the Buncho Station, for example, like a natural processed coffee from Ethiopia, we still refer to where we get those as washing stations because washed coffees from Ethiopia are so ingrained, and so many of the coffees that we love, particularly from Central America, are wash processed. We wanted to highlight a washed coffee. Also, the fact that right now, like I can walk down the street to PERC and have someone brew a cup of it for me is really great. It's also just it's a great coffee, but then above all of that, it's a great excuse to bring Addison here and hear so much more about what they've been doing recently, because they took this coffee and went to Portland to the Specialty Coffee Association Expo to compete in the US Barista Championship. So which is an exceptional thing. But before we dig into the coffee itself, I think we should talk a little about what the US Barista Championship is. So, Addison, do you want to explain that a little bit?
Absolutely. So the US Barista Championship is one of 6 US Coffee Champs official national level coffee competitions. The barista one specifically focuses on brewing espresso and espresso related drinks and service. So essentially there are 3 different levels to the USBC. There's the preliminary level, which is optional to compete in. But if you place, I think, top 3 in a preliminary, then you get a guaranteed spot in the qualifying competition, which is the next level. And it's how they do it kind of seems to shift around a little bit each year, but the qualifying competition is basically like half people who get in based on a lottery and then half people who get in via open registration. The qualifying competition is a 10-minute routine where you have to serve 4 judges 2 different drinks. One of those is espresso, and then one of those is either a milk-based drink or a signature beverage based on the profile of that coffee. You have to then place top 18 at a qualifying competition, of which there are two, to make it to the national competition. And there are 3 rounds to the national competition: round 1, the semifinals, and the finals. So you're basically doing a similar or the same routine many times. But the gist of the national competition is that you're serving in a 15-minute time frame 4 judges, 3 courses: espresso, a milk drink, and a signature beverage. So it's kind of all of the things that you could possibly serve them.
And do they tell you? Sorry.
But
Do they tell you what you have to serve ahead of time? I guess I'm thinking at the qualifying. Like, do you get a 1 week window or some sort of heads up? Like, this is what you'll need to do to fit the signature, or is this like Master Chef style, or something where you come in and they're like, lift the basket, go.
So it's everything that you need to know to do well in the competition. You have that information before.
Okay.
So they'll tell you this is like the parameters for your milk drink. You can only use a maximum of like however much milk. I think it has to be less than a 5-ounce milk drink total. And then for the signature drink, you'll have, the score sheet. So you'll understand how it's scored and kind of have to fit those parameters. So there's a lot of preparation involved to really get to know whatever coffee it is that you're picking, and then how you want to brew it and how you want to present it in this 15-minute routine.
And then I interrupted you, I guess. Sorry. So was there more that you wanted to talk about for the finals or the nationals?
I don't remember where I was going with that.
That's okay. That's okay. We
can just move on.
we start like we're organized and getting down to business, and then Andrew takes everything off track. So that's totally fine.
That's my job.
Oh shoot, there's 2 of us doing that? That explains it. Oh man. Yeah, so you said you get to pick your coffee. Is that like you can pick anything in the world, or?
Yeah, so you can pick any coffee. There are only a few kind of technical requirements to the coffee that you pick. Basically, anything that's done to manipulate the coffee has to happen before the coffee is before the coffee becomes green coffee, basically. So it has to happen during processing, and it can't involve you can't manipulate the green coffee beans basically to create certain flavors.
But like,
but aside from that,
but if you wanted to be like crazy, you could use Folgers if you were like, or what, like anything's, you can go to the grocery store if you forgot your coffee before and just like grab whatever's on the shelf.
You could absolutely do that.
Wouldn't recommend it.
Absolutely would not recommend. But the only requirement is that you grind the coffee on the stage. So you'd have to buy whole bean.
Okay, so it is whole bean.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not like a single origin or blend or anything. Doesn't. I would assume that single origin is your go-to, or it's kind of the PERC flavor profile. So.
Yeah, single origin is definitely my go-to, because that in general is PERC's go-to, and kind of like what we strive to do as a company, which is really highlight specific origins and producers and processing efforts. So, by picking one coffee, you can really like hone in and focus on everything that makes that coffee special.
Awesome. And then, sorry, my brain kind of just goes scattered and wherever it's taking us. So you had also mentioned for qualifiers that you can go prelims and then place top 3 to get prelims, making sure I got this right. That gets you into qualifiers. Top 8 of qualifiers, you said?
Top 18.
Top 18 of qualifiers. So if you are in nationals this year, does it automatically guarantee you a spot for qualifiers? Like, you don't have to go through the lottery again next year?
No.
Oh man.
This past year, the only single person who got I think an automatic spot into round 1 of nationals without having to qualify was the person who got first place last year.
Okay, yeah. The reigning champion gets a chance to defend his or herself.
Exactly.
Yeah. Cool.
Which we didn't mention this, but Addison did compete last year as well and was a semi-finalist at the national level last year. So this was a second run at it.
Yeah, and I guess yes. I guess you can tell the audience how you did, and I totally skipped your background. Like, hey, this is Addison, QA, bam. Tell me about this coffee. Um, so I can give you a few minutes, talk about your background, and then your experience, what you liked or disliked about competition and how it went for you this year.
I feel like I could say a lot to that, and I'll try to be as
I'll give you 30 seconds. Go.
So I guess a little bit about my background in
Sure.
coffee in general. I've worked in coffee for 6 years. I've worked as a barista. I've managed. I've been a lead barista, and quality assurance, which is what I do now. And I've been with PERC for 2.5 years now. I moved to Atlanta from Tallahassee, Florida at the end of 2020 and became a barista working at the Eastlake shop. And then I became the lead barista and helped open the Virginia Highlands store. And a little bit later in 2021, started doing quality assurance. So now I do training and recipe development and kind of basically every quality control thing that exists on the retail side when it comes to like what coffee is served, how it's brewed, and then how it is served.
Okay. So before you go into the competition, so that you're at 28 seconds, so you got 2 seconds for the rest. This, uh, what led you to become a barista? Were you were a barista before PERC, like while you were in Tallahassee?
Yeah, so I took a part-time barista job in college because I thought it would be cool and fun, and it was both of those things. But at some point, I kind of realized that I really liked my barista job more than I liked my college classes. So I took a second part-time barista job and was uh, just doing that a lot. And COVID hit, and I didn't really know what else I wanted to do. And coffee just had always made sense and kept making sense. So I
Yeah.
just kind of followed that.
Well, clearly it seems like a good path based
Yeah.
on how you've been doing at SCA. So do you want to tell us a little bit about your personal experience at SCA instead of just the objective, this is how it goes kind of thing?
Yeah, absolutely. So last year was my first time ever competing in a barista competition. It was something that I did not really know I wanted to do until I started at PERC, actually, because my coworker and also my best friend, Danny, um, I think like 2 weeks into us working together, he came up to me and he was like, "You're going to be the world barista champion one day," which like may or may not be true, but having a friend that believes in you that much, that like encourages you to do something that much, it really counts for a lot.
Yeah.
And at that point, I knew nothing about barista competitions. I had like a vague concept that they existed, but I wasn't really like in that world. So I went home that night and watched two different barista routines and cried watching both of them because I was so moved by like the display of like artistry and craft and how much these people knew about coffee and how willing they were to share that in a very professional setting. And I was just like, whoa, yeah, Danny's right. I do want to do this. Um, and last year, basically because of like the COVID variants, um, the preliminaries and the qualifiers did not happen. They were both kind of canceled. So for the nationals, instead of qualifying for it, they opened a lottery. You just threw your name in a hat, and they picked you. Um, Initially, I didn't get a spot, but 5 weeks before I got picked off the wait list, and I remember I had a call. I think Alan and Philip were both on this call. I was like, I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I should do this. Is this unreasonable? But ultimately decided, yeah, like this is a really cool opportunity, and
Yeah.
even if I
That's awesome.
absolutely fail, I should just throw myself into it. So I did that last year, round one of the National Barista Championship was my first time ever stepping on a barista stage, and I made it to semifinals that year, which I am very proud of.
Yeah, that's great. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And then, sorry, go. You know what? I've been asking a lot of questions, so Alan, go ahead, take one.
Well, no, I I love that we're diving into to Addison's coffee journey, right? And that's kind of been the structure of this podcast, is that we've used a coffee as kind of the focal point, but it's really been just a way to relay some aspect of each of our coffee journeys, and to kind of mark where they fall along the way. Brazil being that gateway that brought us in, and the natural Ethiopia being that like huge leap forward into into craft coffee, and now with a coffee that opened the door for competition, and taking that one step further. And Addison last year, well, I should say, in addition to all of the coffee aspects of barista competition, there's also kind of a storytelling aspect to it as well. It's and it's pretty open-ended. You can kind of get up there and say whatever you want to say. And last year, I think you focused a lot on that journey aspect of it. And one of the lines that first time I heard you say it, like hit me like a million tons, because it's exactly the thing that Philip and I love so much, which was you know capturing all those moments and facilitating those moments when someone says like, wow, I didn't know coffee could do that. And it happens constantly everywhere in your coffee journey. I mean, we're a decade and change in, and it's still, I mean, I had one of those moments the other day. Like it's awesome. That's what's so cool with coffee. And that resonated with me so much. And I think it resonates with everyone who is even vaguely anywhere on that spectrum of their coffee journey. But then this year, I think you kind of took it from being more generalized to being more personal to you and your coffee journey. And so as of now, the full video still isn't up anywhere for people to go and hear all of it. So why don't you share with us a little bit of what your messaging was, and you had the opportunity to get up and say anything. What were the takeaways you wanted people to have beyond a really awesome cup of Dimtu?
Yeah. Uh, so I kind of want to start talking about how last year informed this year a little bit. Um, One of, I think, the most impactful moments of being on the competition stage last year and in the competition space was like sharing something that did feel personal and like very connection focused, in a way that like moved me to tears after I finished. And then a lot of people came up to me and they said, "Oh my God, I don't know you, but you made me cry," which I was kind of honored about. But I think like there are a lot of really, sincere moments that coffee can foster. And creating and giving space to those has always felt really important to me personally, and also in the communities that I like share space in. Um, and so kind of going into this season, I knew that I wanted to do something like that. Like I wanted to focus on like the parts of the industry that like are more sincere and are more people focused and more connection focused. And kind of the challenge of doing this in the context of a barista competition is how you're scored is if you can keep the thread of connection and always tie it back to the coffee, which can be a challenge to talk about something that's a little bit less technical, and still make it all make sense. But I found a way to do it. And that was basically like kind of the root of it was taking this coffee, like the Ethiopia Dimtu Tero, and it has a lot of citrus and floral notes, and like every taste and every smell is very like memory focused. Like we have those sensory awareness because of past experiences with those things. And I lived in Florida for most of my life, and I've lived in Georgia for the past 2.5 years. And so a lot of the sensory experiences that I've gotten to experience and that I've shared with friends and family and communities are these like we had a grapefruit tree in my backyard growing up. So like just smelling a grapefruit like takes me right back to climbing that tree and like getting my t-shirt caught on a branch and ripping a giant hole in it. um, I don't know, like Georgia, even before I lived here, when I was younger, we'd drive up like to North Georgia and buy peaches in late August, and just like get absolutely covered in like the sticky sweetness of all of it. So that's kind of how I got the idea of like taking this coffee and connecting it to these places that I'm from, and also giving the South a place on that stage, because I think there, in the coffee industry at large, there's a lot of like kind of writing off the South, and we have great coffee here and we have great people here. And so all of these things felt important. And kind of in throughout my routine, the main cornerstone of it was talking about connection. And then with each course, I kind of got a little bit deeper and deeper. Um, so the first course was basically just like, this is a delicious coffee. This is a milk drink where we can like meet each other here and like start our journey of connecting. And then I shared the espresso and talked about the profile and how it relates or reminds me of, you know, these places that are my home. And then with the signature drink, I kind of built on the profile of the coffee, making a peach reduction and like adding a couple of Meyer lemon components. And there's like an edible flower garnish for like focus on the florality and everything. And in that moment, I kind of got very personal with the judges in a way that I had hoped to do going into the season, but I didn't know if I could accomplish effectively. And I did accomplish it effectively, I think, which is very cool. But I kind of wanted to draw attention to like, I am aware that I am talking about the South and I'm talking about Florida and Georgia, in ways that like relate to, you know, these places are my home, and I am a queer trans person, like inhabiting the stage and saying that these places are my home. And you know, a lot of the South has been getting a lot of media attention lately because of a lot of legislation that's um, posing a lot of threats and creating really scary environments for a lot of queer and trans people. And so it felt important to like name that and talk about that, and also kind of relate that back to how, you know, even in these places that like inhabit or that like could potentially be like really scary and that are really scary, like coffee has connected me to a lot of queer people and like created these like pockets of like safety and community and understanding, and like within and without the coffee industry, like there's much more work that needs to be done to ensure that these people like have the safety to one exist but also be able to like come into spaces and like be exactly who they are. I think something that I wrote in like an earlier version of this script is like coffee is its best self when we can all show up in like in safety and comfort and also just like joy, because that's you know how we build authentic and real community, which is what coffee is about. Um, while I'm on this thread, can I just,
Yeah.
for people who might not have heard it, read the final thing that I said on that stage?
Please
Please.
do.
Yeah, please.
Okay. Judges, earlier I mentioned that by sharing this drink with you, I am sharing a part of my home. I want to further extend our thread of connection to something a little more vulnerable in these final moments together to acknowledge the weight and complexity of this. I am a queer trans person, and the South is my home. I lived in Florida for most of my life and Georgia for the past 3 years. In my home states, my identity continues to be challenged. But the thing about coffee is that it has connected me to other queer people in ways that give me hope. And hope is how we move forward. So we have to work to protect the ability to form these connections so we can all move forward together, because there's no good point in moving forward alone.
That's great. And something that I think is interesting, and I've actually talked with Alan and lots of people about this, is that message that you're giving, while you're giving it in context of your experience and your community as far as the queer trans community, that is those things that you hope for, that safe space, those are the same thing that everybody hopes for, right? It should be what connects us, not what separates us.
Right.
We're more similar than we realize, and I think the hard thing is that we just don't interact. And when you don't know someone and when you don't have those personal experiences, it's easy to be like, oh, this is different, this is these people, we're all way more similar than and we all want pretty much the same things. We want a safe space, we want a roof over our head, we want to, whatever we want, those things. That it's just interesting that we always seem to focus on the things that are different about us when we're more similar than we are different. I'll leave it at that and get back to you. But it's very personal to me as well. And we are very lucky to have a little small safe space in Savannah. But we know folks that don't, and it's really rough. So sorry, I'll let you back at it. Sorry.
I don't know if I had any other thoughts related to that to say, other than, well, I guess something I was talking about recently was I knew that saying those things felt important and felt honest. And when I was on that stage and saying them and in front of my judges panel and in front of the people in the room and the people watching virtually, I started saying them, and I saw the energy shift in every single judge that was on my panel, and I felt the energy shift in the room where it was I knew I was saying this thing that felt important, but I could feel how important it was to these people sitting right in front of me. And it was also something that they weren't really expecting to hear, which also feels kind of important, because I think there's something to be said about getting on a national barista stage and saying something really vulnerable, and talking about something that really matters to you.
That's amazing. Also, I think it's interesting and worth pointing out that we sort of mentioned when you do have that platform and that stage, there's sort of one agenda to do well, right? And obviously we want to try to do well, and we want to encourage you and support you to do that. But there's also other big wins that are, you have a platform, right? And for me, you won. Right? So we can talk about places and this and that, but ultimately in the grand scheme of things, whether you get 2 or 1 or whatever, those are things that may not be remembered, but I guarantee you that everybody in the room and everybody that saw that is going to remember what you had to say. And I think it's really important. So I'm just really thankful for you, and then for your performance and your words. So that it's really special to me. So thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, that's incredible. I mean, I think also just to have the courage to do that, right? To make it about more than just the coffee and the placing. That's why I love the vibe, that the whole energy that is within PERC, and people like you, Addison, that have that it factor, and it's awesome.
I think it's also important. Alan mentioned something earlier about, we use this podcast, as the coffee as a jump off point. But I think that's something that's essentially encapsulates the coffee community and in general what we do. We, even when we're getting nerdy and specific about Dimtu Tero, that connects us with the people who are farming it, and people that help us get to it, and the communities that come after us who drink it, and the textural, all the interesting texture of coffee in the community, and beyond just our small community that really kind of nerds out on it, even the community at large who just drinks coffee, which is a pretty large community. There's so many different factors of ways that make it enriching, and I think that's why a lot of we're all hooked on being a part of it in some way, and it's really pretty special. And when you start to really kind of peel back some of the layers of the onion, it keeps being rewarding, whether that's through relationships or experiences, or even like you were saying, those tying back to moments in your past where I remember every time you take a sip, like for me, the very first time I ever I ever had coffee was, I remember my dad, like my first memories of my dad when he would drink coffee, and he liked to drink it really hot, and he would do this thing where he would drink a sip, he'd take a sip, and he'd make this noise it was a weird noise he would make, and like I just remember that and seeing him, and then I remember asking him if I could try it, and he was like, sure, and he gave me this look, and it was the grossest thing I've ever tasted. But I have all these sense memories that kind of hit you and fill your your sort of self while you're drinking. So sorry, I can go on all day, so I'll try not to. But there's so many different awesome things, and that's why when we ever talk to people, we like to ask them about their best coffee experience, because I'm always really amazed to hear. It generally starts off with like, oh, I was in Italy, or I was on a camping trip, or it was cold outside, or I was on it's not generally like, oh, it was a natural Ethiopia that was grown at 1900, MASL. Like it's usually like, and sometimes it's not even the what we would consider the best coffee. It's more about who you were with, where you were, and those kind of things.
That's how we start like the first day of training with new baristas when they come in. It's like taking some time and creating some space to like, let's talk about any memory that we have with coffee that feels significant or memorable, and like share those as kind of a connection point so we can go forward and like learn more together.
And I think all this ties into a word that I think is at the very, very core of PERC's mission and values, and that's accessibility. And that is such a through line in, I mean, everything that we've talked about so far, right? It's everything from, I mean, the coffee itself, making it available. Like it's part of why our coffee shops exist in the first place, is to make it so someone can go and have someone brew them a cup of a really great coffee like this, or so much of the way we've designed the bags, designed the website, we've tried to bring these coffees, and we also try to find the most value that we can when we're sourcing a coffee, so that someone who works an hourly job can like afford a really great coffee. Like you shouldn't have to be ultra wealthy to have the small luxury of tasting something really special. And beyond that, like it's opening up the door and making working in craft coffee accessible to as many people as possible, because Phillips hit on this a few times along the way. Like coffee, or this corner of coffee has historically been bearded white dudes. Like that's kind of what it is. And
Hide yourself.
right, like
right.
So
oftentimes bald and a little chubby. It's not good. I'm right.
but that's totally the thing, though, right? Is we want coffee is one of those things that we can all connect over, and most of the people in the world can connect over coffee in some way, and the better we can provide access to that, the better off we all are. And then we haven't mentioned this, but this is not what would typically be considered a competition coffee. This is a coffee that anyone in the South region can walk into the Whole Foods in their city and buy a bag of this today, right now. And this is a coffee that you, Addison, competed with at the highest level, which is incredible. And I think it just goes to show that you can do exceptionally well and create these awesome coffee experiences without relying on there are people who compete with coffees that are literally unobtainable. I mean, there are Eugenioides coffees out there that, as much as we would love to source them and bring them in, like we literally can't do it regardless of price and what we could charge someone. Like we just don't have access to them. So I think that's incredibly special to do that with a coffee that is accessible to everyone, and it just kind of ties all this together. Like it's all about just accessibility and making these incredible coffee experiences, again, wherever you are in your journey, or however coffee or not specifically coffee focused, those experiences are accessible to the most people possible. And I love that.
Yeah, and I remember a line that you used that has stuck with me from your first time competing, meeting people where they are, and I love that. I thought that was really great, and it's something that I think that we try to do. It's hard. Like anytime you get like super nerdy and learn a lot about something, there inevitably potentially gets to be a level of it's like somehow these levels like I'm above you in this or that, but I don't think about it like that, because everybody didn't know something before they knew something, or hasn't tried something until they tried something. So we're all on just different places on our journey, and I think that everybody is in a better place when we welcome people and share what we're super into and bring them invite them into those things. So I'm just appreciative to have someone like you on the team that helps us do that across the board. As nice and important as it is to use the stage of competition to be able to reach people, I think it's really important to know that because you train and create our whole, what I don't even know how many 30, 40, 50 baristas that are interacting with everybody, all of our customers every day. You're affecting all of those people who come into every single one of our shops, and hopefully we're making great drinks and treating people well. So those are equally as great. It's nice to talk about the competition, but I love what we're able to do and how important you are every day to our community and both just at PERC and then the folks who come in. So I don't know. That's not a question.
Yeah, thank you, thank you. um, I mean, I do have something to say in response to that, which is like, I I remember my initial training at PERC really vividly, and like, I just remember one feeling like I was like, oh my God, they know so much. They have so much information. And also, they're so willing to share it with me. Like, they want me to know and be excited about all of these things that they know and are excited about. And I took a bunch of notes, and I remember going home to my friends, and I was like, guys, let me tell you everything I learned in training. So I mean, like, some of it was nerdy, but one of the things that the person who trained me said, that is still a part of the training curriculum and is something I think about it a lot, is coffee is about people and experiences. And that's how we started that first day. And so that's kind of how, we start training now. But that was one of the things that I went home to my friends that day, and I was like, y'all, coffee is about people and experiences. And it's weird that we don't talk about that more.
That's so
100%.
awesome. So let me ask you, now that you are two years as a competitor, right? What are the things that you've learned through not just competition, but the hours and hours and hours of preparation that you've put into competition, and how that has changed your own, I guess, knowledge and interaction with coffee? Like, how have you then translated that into making the people around you better, right?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, I mean, I think that preparing for competition just kind of expands how you look at both brewing coffee and extracting coffee, and how you look at serving coffee, and how you look at the industry at large. So there are like a lot of pieces to it. Um, I think maybe one of the biggest is like doing the work of picking a coffee and deciding how you want to serve it, and deciding why it's important to you, and or why it's important to the industry at large. Um, it kind of just gives you a perspective that like makes you kind of regard every coffee a little bit differently. Um, I think that when it comes to training people, I always want like every person, whenever we taste any coffee, I'm like, I want you to like find two things about this coffee that you like. Like whether it's, it tastes like, I don't know, maybe it's like, I think someone described our Brazil Legender once as the final form of diner coffee. And I was like, I love that description because it is. It's like, something that is approachable and delicious, but it's also a really good version of that. So like I guess, encouraging people to find ways to connect with whatever the coffee is. I think it's maybe a little bit easier for me to do that after having been through so much like personal journey to find ways to connect with different coffees. But I also just think that when it comes to like, you know, preparing for some of the logistical aspects of the competition that are like developing your recipes and crafting a signature beverage, there's so much trial and error and so much development and so much like throwing things at walls to see what sticks that you learn a lot. You learn a lot more skills when it comes to like how to extract espresso really well and how to do that reliably, and how to like, play with flavors and how to transform flavors, and then all of those things, like as someone who teaches people how to do coffee, naturally inform and expand my language for how I can talk about it and how I can explain it. I find myself kind of often like, pulling from examples of when I spent however many hours trying to find the most perfect shot of whatever coffee. You learn so much in that amount of time. So it kind of helps, like, develop, more language and more vocabulary, and then like find ways to like connect with people more over like, this is actually why this is happening, and I can explain it to you in 7 different ways now.
Right. I think it's interesting because when you're doing those more specific skills, there's not, each time you make something, if it's not quite right or if it's not right at all, it's not a failure because you learn something, right? And so my wife was a scientist and now teaches, but has left the bench because she was like, it's difficult to go to work every day and just like, okay, that didn't work. Okay, that didn't work. That and she most of your experiments don't work, but those are all, every bit of that is a learning and saying, okay, this didn't work. Why didn't it work? This is how you get better. Right. And so it's hard to kind of get into that mental state. And then just real quick to speak to the coffee can be very intimidating, especially at the point where you're cupping it and you get into that room and maybe you haven't done that before and you're slurping and you're spitting and smelling the grinds and doing all those things. And so figuring out how, like you said, just say 2 things you like about it. Sometimes I even were like, say anything, just because it can be hard to even speak because you don't want to be wrong, and I think that happens a lot in life where you're worried about being wrong, so it's easy to just not express yourself. Right, exactly. Yeah. And then that doesn't feel good. It's not a good space to be in, and we don't want people to be in that space at all. So I'm like, you can say a color or say a song or a band. It doesn't matter. Like like oftentimes when I'm tasting natural Ethiopians, I'll just say purple. Like it's an easy. Those are just things that I think trying to get people involved and make it less intimidating. And back to what Alan said about I forget the word you used, accessibility. Right?
Accessibility.
That was great.
Yeah.
Sorry, again, no question. I just was inspired to talk based off of what you said.
Yeah, you always get mad at me for not addressing people.
Yeah, I'm just talking. I like to talk.
Yeah, that's all good.
I think that's incredibly important. Just kind of making sure that people know that like whatever they say is totally valid, because it's their experience, and also we all start somewhere. And I think that coffee can be intimidating, and there are a lot of spaces that foster that kind of intimidating culture. But I think that something that I think we do really well is kind of letting people, start wherever they're at and like giving them the resources to learn the things that they want to learn in a way that's not like scary or hopefully not overwhelming.
All right. I think we're coming up on time, and I feel like that is a awesome like summary kind of statement from Addison. I don't know if anybody else wanted to add anything. Is there any closing remarks that you're farewells? Or I think we can find Addison's video will be online eventually, right? Will that be posted via the web letter, or how are we going to find it?
Yeah, it's a little hard sometimes to find those things, but I think that would be a great idea, is to create a newsletter and put some links in there. So let's do that. Good idea.
Right. So that's where it'll be. Yes.
That's where it'll be. So sign up for the newsletter. Let's get down to business. Buy some coffee. No, I'm kidding.
Well, so normally I would give some brew tips for whatever coffee we're talking about.
That'd be great.
We were talking about a coffee. Yeah, my bad.
Yeah. But before we go, I think Addison is definitely the expert on the Dimtu. Has brewed thousands of cups of this at this point. So, what you got for us? How should people brew this at home?
I've definitely pulled thousands of shots of this coffee. So I'll talk about espresso, you talk about filter. How about that? So espresso wise, if you have the ability to brew this coffee as espresso, I like using slightly larger than a 1-to-2 ratio. And generally pulling like a shot that maybe you think is a little bit too quick. It really can lean into this coffee's like nice citric acidity. And if you extract it a little bit longer, then it's still good. You probably just get a little bit less citrus and a little bit more like tea and like black tea in the finish, which is also really pleasant. Those are kind of my go-to espresso brewing tips. Alan, do you have any pro filter tips?
Yeah, well, I mean, it very much follows that. I mean, this is one of those coffees where going longer or shorter on the ratio, or finer or coarser, or longer or shorter on time, like it's really forgiving. You're going to get a good cup kind of any direction, but you're going to lean more into citrus or peach, or I get a lot of Earl Grey tea out of it a lot of times. So it's a little bit of where in that spectrum you want to land, and kind of like you were just saying, if you're a little bit coarser or a little bit faster, you're going to end more on the citrus end of it. Kind of middle of the road, you end up with more peachiness, and push it harder, and I think you get more of that tea, that Earl Grey or black tea. It works well. I mean, we brew it in the Clever at the shops. We've had a few iterations of that. That's what I'm drinking right now, and it works really well because you kind of get a little bit of everything, and I tend to like it with a heavier dose, so a little bit stronger ratio. It tends to do really well because it just becomes really nice and full-bodied and sweet.
Yeah, I brewed some this morning on a Bonavita, and had just been brewing the Colombia El Tambo, which we haven't talked about yet. But I made it just a teeny bit finer on the grind, and went a little bit. The dose was a little heavier, and it was a really nice cup. So I don't know if anybody's brewed the El Tambo, but just
I was pulling shots of it this morning. We should talk about that one soon.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that'd be great.
Right. So maybe upcoming soon.
Coming soon. There we go.
So thanks for listening then, everybody. And we will see you in a few weeks. Bye.
Thanks so much, Addison.
Bye. Yeah.